All right, so let's get started. We're passing around the attendance sheet. Just make sure you sign up on it because we're not calling roll anymore. And today the 2 story ideas were due. So we will be looking those over on Thursday. Well, maybe a few today. But on Thursday is a mandatory attendance day, so we're hoping everyone will be in so they can discuss their story ideas with everybody else. So we can learn as a group about what we're trying to do here. So that's good. Get those in if they're not in yet so we can actually work on them. Topic for today, radio interviewing. Assignment for next Tuesday is to write radio interview questions for the interview you plan to conduct, which is based on one of the 2 stories you're handing in today. So now, of course, you'll be wondering, is my story any good? Which one should I do the questions on? And you can assume that I'm going to say yes to your story. Usually, the only time I say no to your story is when you have no one you can interview. It's like, basically, so as long as you got someone you can talk to, that's a very good first start. If you remember, you had to have 2 story ideas. If both of those lead to people that you can talk to, I'd say, pick the one that you are more enthusiastic about because you're the one who's going to be writing this. So remember that you only have to develop one of these 2 story ideas. If you choose, you can change midway and do the second one. If you're, something really amazing lands in your lap in October, you can change and do something completely different if you get an even better story idea as you're going on. Hey, Brian. So you can, of course, take this as a starting point. So we will, like I said, share those in class, mandatory class meeting next class. Anybody who wants to start the discussion today, there'll be time later on in class today to share what you've done already because there's going to be 30. There are over 30 people in this class, so there's no way we could talk to them all next class if they all appear. So happy to hear your story ideas already. All right. Oh yeah, something else I wanted to, pertaining to today's topic, but there's a series of podcasts about interviewing, which I just wanted to see if I could get to any of those. Maximum fun. Let's just see if Suarez turn around. So these might be interesting if we have a chance to hear 1 or 2 of these. Little bits of it. I just heard one last night with Werner Herzog. Is that still somebody who rings a bell to you?
Yes.
Anybody want to do a quick capsule? Oh, there's Terry Gross. They did Terry Gross as well. Cool. So, I mean, the ones that I've listened to have all been excellent. There's Herzog. He's still looking okay, considering what he does. It's like pretty crazy stuff. Ray Suarez. This one was really very good, too. We may dip into these, but I highly recommend the whole series. It's called The Turnaround, series of podcasts hosted by Jesse Thorne, who's a public radio host. And he basically is just interviewing interviewers, very famous interviewers like Terry Gross or Werner Herzog, very different people, very different outlets and stuff. So if you're at all interested in professional interviewers, this is an excellent podcast. Audie Cornish, I can highly recommend as well, the Audie Cornish episode where she talks about the importance of preparation, being prepared for an interview. All right, so there's one thing I promised you that we would get to that we didn't get to last class, just before we get into this. So there's a brief insert in Chapter 3 of your textbook about the Associated Press Stylebook. So, the Associated Press Stylebook is a resource for formatting and composition for print journalists. They also have recommendations for broadcast journalists. And when we talk about journalism, this would also be the default Bible for public relations as well. So where a company or news outlet doesn't have a style book of their own, and many of them do, but if they don't, then by default it's going to be 99% of the time the Associated Press style book. So this is a book that's actually published as a book. It's also a software plugin which would plug into your favorite script writing tool, and you could call upon it to find out how to write names and stuff.
There's also an app.
All other stuff. It's an app on your phone too. Cool.
Do you know what the charge is for it?
No idea, but you can look it up on their website. It'd be pretty easy to find out. They want to sell it to you, I'm sure. So there are some differences between AP style for print and AP style for broadcast. And this little document that I've put up here covers some of the major differences. And if you're just coming to this without any familiarity with the AP print journal or style book, that's no problem, because the information here can, cover for a lot of stuff you're writing. Broadcast scripts, in other words. So you don't need to learn the print way if you're a broadcast journalist, but it wouldn't hurt. But let's look here, for instance, and I would generalize and say that one of the things that you can just figure about all this is that for broadcast, they want you to write in a format which is easy to read. So abbreviations and such would be avoided, because when somebody's reading a script, they wouldn't want to say the Ford Motor Inc. or something like that. You make it easier on the reader if you write Ford Motors Incorporated, and so on and so forth. So wherever you encounter something which is like, which way should I do this? Is it easier to do, which way is it easier to read? All right. Then if you want to look it up for sure, this document here will probably cover 9 cases out of 10. And then there's going to be the more obscure cases where you should actually look into the style book if you're wanting to, get that level of specificity there, I suppose. But as you can see here, where you might abbreviate parts of a company name, parts of a set of credentials or something, the typical rule is write them out fully. We already encountered this thing about initials when we talked about ARF, which is glorious. So, this is a little small for you guys to read, but there we go. So if they're well-known acronyms like CIA, FBI, NASA, YMCA, it's okay to use them in their acronym form. However, use a hyphen to separate the letters FBI, CIA. But if someone is going to read it like NASA, then write it out as NASA. Does that make sense? So somebody who wanted to read ARF, we should write it ARF, ARF, right? Okay. Names, don't abbreviate junior or senior, JR, SR, right? Write it out. So there's another one. Same thing, miles per hour, miles per gallon, etc. So write it out. So it's a general rule, and that's nice because then you don't have to memorize the style book, right? It's generally, does it read well? Then you're on the right track. Continue. Addresses, numbers. So numbers 0 through 11 here we go. Where's the numbers rules here? Let's just find it, because this
0
is,
to 10.
it's actually to 11. Don't ask me why. But.
In writing, it's 10.
Yeah.
Broadcast, it's 11, because this
Odd, isn't it?
That's weird.
Really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It's print versus print.
Yeah, so 1 through 11, write it out. Above 11, use numerals. Gotcha. And, there's more in here, which is, again, not something we'll do point by point, but rather look it up when you feel you need to look it up, I guess. Nika?
So do we italicize even when we're working in all caps?
No, I wouldn't. No. But for instance, in an example like this, U-S Constitution. Yeah. So, anything else that is really super important here? Political parties. Satan, capitalized Satan, but lowercase devil and satanic.
That's my favorite role.
Okay, so that's oh, here's the piece on numerals. All right, yeah. So there you go. Spell out 1st through 11th. Use numerals for larger numbers.
What about 0?
0,
Say
you
0.
0. Gotcha. Spell out cents, so on and so forth. I'd say, scan it and then go back to it when you feel you need it. It's all there, boy. So that is linked on our website. This is the one that's in our textbook is considerably shorter. You may do fine just with what's in the textbook too, but that is linked on our website. So there you
In
go.
modules?
Yeah, in modules. Yeah. So it's there it is. Stylebook examples. And then here's something that I was going to spend a little time on was, well, these were just some, once we had consumed that, I was going to give you some little ones to practice on. But let's get into interviewing instead, because you can practice on your own scripts eventually. Cool. Righto. So your assignment will be to come up with a list of questions. And what we're looking at today in the chapter concerns that plus more. Preparation, very important, involving how you present yourself, bringing contact information with you, getting contact information at the end of any kind of interview you do, following up with a thank you and keeping the contact and connection open. So those are important things, that I would, just basic stuff. Dress professionally. You never want to be dressed worse than the people that you're interviewing. Maybe a little bit more presentable, possibly. JP?
How many interview questions do you want us to come up with?
I think 10 is a good starting number. The more you ask, the more information you have to deal with afterwards. So I think 10 is probably a good starting number. What else are we talking about? Open-ended, closed-ended questions. That's an important thing to worry about. And identify ways to draw additional information. Yeah, okay. So nice. There's kind of a pacing. All right, so interview preparation. Yeah, you want to be clear about what you're trying to find out, particularly in broadcasting. This is a big difference between print interviewing and broadcast interviewing, and we should get that out right away. A print journalist goes in looking for quotes, confirming facts, and they have the ability to kind of, pull from a variety of different moments in the interview. An important quote here, an impression they can bring in here, some basic factual information that they've verified thanks to the interview. So they can pull stuff together from a lot of different places in an interview and produce an accurate picture, I think, of what went on in the interview. A broadcast interview has additional or somewhat different constraints in that you are searching for concise sound bites or sections of interview that you can use in a video or in a radio piece. So whereas the print journalist can pull a lot of stuff from different places and still create a decent representation of what was said, you are tied to, you have to have stretches of useful material. So can you see the difference? Now, what's interesting for your upcoming interview assignment on one of the stories that you're going to present, either tomorrow, next class, or today, or whatever. What's interesting is you are not required to actually film these or record them in order to edit them and work them into a piece, right? So you have some of the flexibility and freedom of a print journalist that you wouldn't normally have working in broadcasting. That means, you know, if you find your best material comes at the beginning, the end of the interview, and you're even splicing things together practically, that's okay, all right? Whereas if you got in the editing room with a video of that and you actually had to use that, you would have trouble cutting things back to back, right? You know, I think we've all, well, anyone in broadcasting has been faced with, you know, having a stretch of tape, and the first 3 seconds are great, and then we want to jump ahead a minute, and then we want to go here, and you wind up cutting B-roll in. It's like you've barely seen the talking head talk before you're cutting to a bunch of other stuff to cover over all of the patching that you're doing in an interview that's for video, right? So you may find yourself asking questions several times over in a broadcast interview, something which wouldn't appear cool in a print interview, you know, where I think you can stand back and let the subject speak as they would in a broadcast interview. You may allow that to happen. That's typically what I would try to do, is allow that to happen, and then finding the words, their words, that said the type of thing you want them to say, come back again afterwards and say, that was really interesting. I have so little time to present that interesting idea. You said X, Y, and Z. Can we try that again with that, if that is, you know, that if that's the way you want to say it? Most of the time they'll say it again, and you know, you're then in a kind of a diminishing returns. The more you make them redo it, the more they sound like a robot. So maybe the second time they do it, you may get something decent, which is concise and also sounds relatively off the cuff. You do it 10 times, they sound like rah, 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 rah. It's like almost useless. So these are special things for, let's say, broadcast interviews that print doesn't have to deal with. Shannon?
I've found that asking someone, what do you mean by that, will make them rephrase it in a way where it's expository, get all that information concisely, and they're not robotic about it.
That's a good one. Plus, what do you mean by that is open-ended as well, you know? Yeah, yep. Sometimes you get to the people who could say the same thing happily like 20 times over, slightly differently, which is, yeah, you know, you work with what you can get. But just wanting to draw a distinction between the challenges of broadcast interviewing, where you got to get the information, you got to get the quotes, but you've also got to get it in a nice tight chunk that you can edit, versus a more free-ranging interview, which is what you guys can do on this assignment, which is nice. So feel like you can stretch out and get what you need from your source without worrying about having them rephrase it, so you get exactly what you want. You know. Righto. So understanding the purpose of your interview, I mean, that kind of goes along with knowing what kind of sound bites you need. And again, in TV news or radio news, you may be dealing with only a couple minutes. A couple minutes is a long piece, right? And story editors, people that you work for, are not going to respond well to, could I have just 2 minutes 15? You know, at the end of the day, if it's planned for 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. So you kind of need to know what the story is going in and what things you need as you go to somebody. If you're going to an expert, you know, you need to kind of know the facts that you've got to get out of them, and so on. Now, if you're dealing with eyewitnesses, then, you know, you're more hands-off and just trying to get their account of what things are. So depending on who you're talking to, be aware of what you need from them before you go in. Now, in this case, you're only going to talk to one person probably that's all that's required for this assignment. So bring it all, you know, bring what you think you need to have in terms of, you know, the factual stuff about when the event is, as well as the, you know, the more experiential stuff about what it's like. Yeah.
How long is this piece gonna be? Because if I want to interview more than one person, will it all fit in the time frame?
It won't fit in the radio feature, but it will fit later on. You'll do it longer as a TV piece and then longer as a web piece. So you're not wasting time by interviewing more people. Because you may not be able to use them in the first time around, that's all. But there's more iterations. So, yeah, cool. Jenny?
On that question, if we were to ask more questions and acquire more data, I mean, certainly we could be selective
Yeah.
the first time for the radio piece and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So if you have more than you can fit into the radio piece, you can always go back when you have more time and use more of it. Yeah, yeah, that's actually, that would be a good outcome, yeah. Just the thing is, always the more you get, the more you have to kind of sift through and worry about. So, righto. So the interview with Audie Cornish, she's an NPR host, All Things Considered. Is that the name of the show currently? I think it's like the flagship afternoon show. So she does interviews like, 3 a day or something like that. Just incredible pace. So one thing she's talking about in her piece is preparation. Just, being as up to date as you can about the information that you're trying to get from a source. So there's a bit in the textbook about where to go for this kind of information. So newspaper files, you're looking, search the name of the person that you're talking to. Have they been in other media already? That's useful. Also, if they're involved in an organization, has the organization been written about or otherwise shown on TV? So you can do Google searches. You could also do library database searches, which are just keyed towards newspapers, so that would get you outside of your market and also outside of Google as a search engine, although Google's pretty good for this type of thing. So that would be good to find out as much as you can from archives. And newspapers themselves have clips, of course, and clipping services. So they have their own archives of the stuff that they've published, but you don't have access to that. Websites, so if this is dealing with a corporation or something, here definitely if you're using your journalistic skills in the service of PR, you will, deal a lot with company websites, and so you can find out, people's bios, so that can be finding out stuff about their past, and of course that could come from LinkedIn as well. The trade press, broadcast has broadcast and cable that does a lot of profiles of professional broadcasters. There was radio and records on the radio industry. And there are numerous smaller trade publications. So they're reliable sources of information, but you may not hear about them every day because you really have to be, in the industry in order to know that they exist. A good reference librarian can turn those up for you, or you can try to find out from people in the business. These would have lots of stories about people who don't make the mass media, but who are important in their field. So whether it's bios and interviews or, technical stuff where they appear, that could be useful. Social media, so the big one would be LinkedIn. For so much, but finding out about somebody's career, having potential, kind of like icebreaker type questions, feeling around to see if there's any, they happen to be an alumnus of a university in your home state or something like that, and you might not say, hey, I read about this in your profile and what do you think, but you might just drop it so that you try to create a little bit of a connection there or something. So that would be of interest. Or I guess the implication here is that if you go into more personal social media, you might find out more about what they've said about what they're into. So that would be good. Not I saw your kids the other day. People could feel stalked, I guess. Although I remember going to this Disney junket and one of the people who was presenting, who was dealing with interns, and obviously a lot of people would love to be interns with, Disney and ABC and stuff. She was saying, I understand. She said basically, there's a certain level of stalking, which is what people do, and that's okay. So she kind of expected it. So, alrighty. Other sources. So, if this is an extended profile, which we're not doing, but you might ask around for people who know your source to get additional information on them. It seems to me anytime you read like a Rolling Stone profile of somebody, you get, comments from their friends, their coworkers, stuff like that about them. So that would be a source of other stuff. But again, for our purposes, you only need one source on this first story. So, that's it. Gotcha. Gaining the interview and getting the trust of your source. Okay, so this is where I think, depending, and I'll be interested to hear your profile ideas, but this is where it can be, more comfortable to work with someone who you already have their trust, but also maybe a more rich learning experience to work with somebody that you don't necessarily know. So I don't require you to have like kind of arm's length distance from your topic, but some journalist professors do, and I think that's a good idea. I think you can learn more that way. So again, it seems like we're repeating ourselves, but understanding what you need from this source. So if it's a profile, remember we talked about the notion that profiles often kind of conform a person to a narrative that you bring to the profile. Not rigidly, that you couldn't deviate if they're giving you a story which contradicts the narrative that you bring to it. But very often, to give some shape to a profile, it's useful to have a narrative or a focus already. I had a job for once where I had to interview somebody who, there were 10 people who won a Governor General's Prize in Canada that year, and the person in our province was a very famous philosopher named Charles Taylor, and he'd written like 30 books, and he was like 80 years old or something. So he won this prize, and I had a 4-minute profile to do. So here you have a person who's lived for 80 years and has written like dozens of books and stuff. So he had recently been involved in discussions about language politics and diversity. And I thought, well, this is what people probably know about him now. And so we did the 4 minutes directed at that. But I was still asking questions like, once language politics and diversity were on the table, I was still like, I had a couple of biographical questions, like, well, how long have you been passionate about this? Has this been a theme through, all of your early work and stuff like that? So it was just a way of narrowing things down, So whether it's a narrative of rags to riches or overcoming diversity, or more of an intellectual narrative that I was building there because he was a philosopher, and it just seemed like it had to be, finding that focus and being aware of that as you go in can make the difference between like floundering and feeling awful for days, or being confident about what you need. So that's it. And the only thing I would counsel is be open in case their view of it is completely different. And so that's important to kind of get those expectations out there. If you phone them, in advance, you say, I'm kind of thinking of talking about, language politics and diversity. Would you would you enjoy that? And so get that out there so they know what to expect, and they'll be that much better, I think. So cool. Interest elements, we keep talking about those, and so, they were celebrity, oddity. Anyone else remember those? What was it? F, famous. O, oddity. C,
Controversial.
was it conflict? Conflict. And I.
Immediacy?
Immediacy, I think, was one. That's true. Which, like, basically, why would this matter to you? And what would the last one be? Impact would be, why does this matter to you? I think you got it, Jenny. So immediacy, what would be the difference? Good point.
Happening
Immediacy
right
is
now.
like proximity, or if it's happening
Proximity
right now,
is different than immediacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shannon, what do you think is immediacy?
It's happening right now. Like, it would be stupid to report Fleet Week in San Francisco in July, but the first week of October is a really good time.
Makes a lot of
Fleet
sense.
Week, because that's what it is.
Makes a lot of sense. All right. So thinking about what questions you're going to ask would be related to what attracts an audience. Thank you, folks. I feel a little bit incompetent, I must say, right now.
We did this for the
If I had more time to review all this stuff, it would be a good thing. Approaching the source, make sure you display proper manners. Introduce yourself and explain your purpose. So, yeah, I think explaining your purpose is a good thing. Some types of journalism, the investigative gotcha type, which is not what I'm expecting you to do for this class, that type may require a certain amount of, hold your cards close to your chest before you get a chance to talk to your source. But it's that's not the way working journalists or student journalists go about doing their jobs day in and day out. Typically you're talking to people who want to tell you stuff. They don't want to, they're not expecting really difficult questions that'll put them on the spot. If you have those questions and that's what you want, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying most of the time you're talking to, government officials, representatives of different institutions, be they educational, fire department, police department. You're speaking to professional communicators who probably already have their information at their fingertips. And, so you're gathering what you need for your story, but you're dealing with people who are largely skilled at providing the press the information that they need. Now that could be frustrating again if you have that investigative bent and you want to get around that. But again, for learning the basics, and a lot of it is dealing with professional communicators. Has anyone dealt with specifically with PR people, like when getting to talk to companies? Araceli, what was your experience?
I had to, for the piece that I'm actually going to do, I'm interviewing two people, but one of them is what I'm going to push for this purpose here. The other one was one of the program directors for the PG&E project to electrify the Caltrain. So before I could even get her to do a phone call with me, she had to organize it with her PR person at PG&E so that he could be on the conference call in order to listen in and make sure that she didn't say something that was going to give me more information than what they're allowed to give at this point. And so then I also had to submit the interview questions to him, through her via him, to approve them before they could even agree to give us a date for an interview for that particular piece.
Was that frustrating to you?
I don't think it was that frustrating. I just kind of felt like I knew that I was going to have to deal with them. And the piece itself is more about women working in infrastructure and construction and less about the secrets behind PG and electrical rail. Right. So I just really formulated the questions gearing, because that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm going with it. And so I think once he was on the phone and he heard that there wasn't any kind of sneaky questions, then he was much more relaxed. But I was really nice to him and very polite, and didn't interrupt him and just let him kind of say everything that I expected him to say.
Cool.
And it all went well. So he didn't say no. He actually at the end was like, okay, so yeah, we can go forward with this. And
I really like the angle of your story, by the way, too.
Oh, thank you.
That's
Because they're underrepresented, so I really want to kind of feature women that are doing different careers that have traditionally been reserved for men. So it's part of an ongoing series that we're doing there.
Great.
And this particular episode is about women
Wow.
in construction and infrastructure.
Nice. It's nice to be able to do, do what you're doing and also work on stuff that, you know, is good. Yeah,
It's cool, but it's also,
does good.
But the other angle too is that they're a part of like something that's more of a legacy than themselves. They've like reached a high point and they rule over both men and women. Well, I don't say rule, but you know what I mean.
They have authority over.
They have authority over people, but yet it's a project that's going to live well past their own careers. It's going to be a part of San Francisco's history forever.
Cool.
So it's great timing too because they're getting to the point where it's going to be finished pretty soon.
Okay.
So the timing was pretty right for this.
Cool. I had exactly the same experience in terms of dealing with PR people, submitting the questions in advance, and you know, feeling them kind of relax as you're going in. That okay, this is on, you know, this is on the level. This is what they want to know, you know. But still, the PR people stayed on the line till the very end. This is a call to Cisco about some technology that they're developing. It's like same thing. Shannon, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, PR people are like your mom and dad when you're a little kid, and they really want you to follow rules. So
Yeah.
they're the gatekeepers of the image of their company.
Yeah.
So they're really stupidly specific, and it can be incredibly frustrating. But if you get it in your head that this is like your mom or your Sunday school teacher or somebody who really wants you to believe a certain way, then they're easier to deal with. But when you try to stretch them and get them out of that, like, this is who we are and what we do by the book thing, they don't really like that.
Right.
But it's also, you know,
Their job depends on
they
it.
kind of have to do their job.
Their job depends on that. Yeah.
So you just have to let them do their job and not feel like you're going to try and
Yeah.
feel obsolete or in the way.
And I'm always
Yeah, just stay happy. It's fun. Like, thank you so much for your time.
There was this. I won't find it as quickly as I'd like. There wasn't a. Maybe you guys have heard of this. There was something happened a while ago where a journalist from Wired was going to interview, a CEO, someone quite important, and by accident, the PR person emailed, instead of emailing the research they had done on the journalist to the internal person at the company who was going to be interviewed, they emailed it to the journalist by accident. So the journalist got the information that the source was going to get. It was like 14 pages long of, like, you know, quotes from earlier stories and, you know, speculations on all kinds of stuff. It was really, I'll try to search it out and just share it with you guys. But it was shocking to the journalist because it was so in depth, so aggressive, and it was kind of like, you know, as though they were being attacked by, you know, the barbarians from outside the company, you know, and the journalist was just like, I just wanted to ask some questions and stuff.
just wired. It's not like
Exactly right.
Scary website.
Exactly, yeah. So I'll look it up and find it for you. But the other thing is you put people in charge of like PR, and they're going to like go 110% into PR, you know, and they're going to try to control everything that happens in an interview. So, you know, that's why it's so hard to get hired in a job, because there are people at HR who are going to go 110% into finding the greatest candidate. And it's like, damn, can't we just go back to things being a little easier?
Malcolm, who did you mention was the host of All Things Considered?
Audie Cornish?
There we go.
Does that make sense? Am I getting her? She's in here.
Someone in chat asked.
Oh, somebody in chat. Oh, thank you for moderating chat again. Where is she? She's going to be down here.
That's the term.
Yeah, turn around. Let's just see. Because she was on Audie. There she is. So show me, where is she next? I don't know. She's in there. She must be on a different page. As I said, she was inspiring about preparation and just how she has no time for people who aren't prepared, because she has to do like 3 of these a day. So, anyway, yeah, it's professional. But I mean, she has people working for her who will give her, you know, a lot of the prep that we're talking about. But she still has to do some of it. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we talked about approaching the source. Where should we meet? The advice here is to meet in a location where they're comfortable. Especially for broadcasting, that typically doesn't mean like let's meet in a cafe, because it's super loud and impossible to control. So go to their home territory and hope that it doesn't look like my house. You know what I mean? So
But
you know,
that's a profile. That's part of their character.
it could be, you know.
do
So
they want?
I don't like to think that I live the way I live by choice. But yeah, so but go where they're comfortable, and it's true. You know, if you're looking for observation, if you're looking for impression, then if the location does say something about them, then you know, you can use that in a print piece. When you're shooting, I mean, we never had time to go and visit a location before we actually used it. Another thing that we had to do was we'd often be shooting for, you know, like a half hour or something, and so we had a rule, at least in one place I was working, every interview had to have a different background. So we would go to someone's house and we'd shoot in one direction, and then basically we'd get them to stand up, move this way, sit down over there, shoot in that direction, and then we'd do another bit and we'd sit them down and shoot in that direction, just so that every time we'd have a different background. And it's true, when you cut all of it together, it looks like you've done a lot more legwork than some of the other channels, which would just do like a big piece where it's like constantly the same background or something. So I guess broadcasting brings into it, you know, issues about things being quiet and intelligible and visually interesting and that kind of stuff. So it adds more. Shannon?
There was an interview on KTVU a couple nights ago where they talked to the woman, and you could tell they were standing in the newsroom that we were standing in, right in front of that desk, and
Okay.
then she was outside in the parking lot. Even though she was only in one building, they stretched it and made it look like they went everywhere with
Go
her.
out
Into KTVU.
a couple of different places. So it's maybe a common rule to move it a bit. So go to the source's turf, interacting with your source. Go slow as you meet your source. When I was coming up, I worked on a show for 2 years with a guy, you know, I think one way you would describe him was a peacock. He had these Versace suits, red, purple, green. I mean, they were, well, no, no, nothing like that. I mean, I never got anywhere near that, you know, rung on the ladder. But yeah, so he'd invested in a lot of colorful suits, and he did a lot of clever wordplay. So you would meet people who were like, who is this guy? And then he'd start like, you know, doing his verbal acrobatics, and they'd be like, what? And you know, eventually I had to ask him, you know, like, keep the suits because I know you paid a lot of money, but please, you know, try to be more straightforward when you're dealing with people. And it was a bit of a kind of a personal thing to have to settle. But you know, so I'm just saying that if you want to get good stuff from people, you have to kind of, you know, go easy to start out with and see what makes them comfortable. You're really just trying to make them comfortable talking and getting what you want. So that was useful. Once you get to know the source, either part of your interview or several interviews you conduct over time, you can become more laid back. True. If you feel that it's going well, then you can, it's a little bit more familiar is okay. You know, always just watch who you're dealing with. And you know, that is a very important thing. Let's stop for a second, because I think you can learn a lot of this stuff, but I think also a lot of it comes just from, you know, dealing with people anyway. An interview is dealing with people just like you normally would. So can you guys think of some sort of interpersonal skills that you have or that you would like to have that would be useful in interviewing, that you can think about kind of developing for this? Nika and then Shannon?
You can empathize if they have struggles and kind of just show that you care, and you know, you can, well, don't pity them, but show that you can understand what struggles they went through and show concern for issues.
Yeah, be empathetic. Yeah, absolutely. Shannon?
Be really polite, especially with people that are older than you, and don't say no problem. I just read a thing the other day about how younger people say no problem, and they only say you're welcome sarcastically.
Okay.
When someone says thank you, say you're
Interesting.
welcome. Don't be informal.
Was this about journalism, or was this like a general
It was a
kind
general-
of linguistics, everyday thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Millennials not using you're welcome.
No worries, right? Yeah, an old person might not get that. I mean, I don't know.
Does it convey the same amount of respect to them?
Yeah. And some people demand more respect than others. That's another thing. Other kind of interpersonal skills you already have that might be
It's
Araceli?
really important to be a good listener and to try and repeat things back to them that they said to you, like in order for them to really understand that you're hearing them and that you're absorbing what they're saying and you're not just like hoping the camera's going to catch it or the recorder and that you're just there to just blurt out questions. And it gets them to become more comfortable because then it becomes a little more conversational. And they start to relax and kind of, I don't want to say they give more dirt per se, but they start to feel less like it's a formal, stiff interview, and you get better sound bites out of it.
Agreed. Absolutely
It sounds
agreed.
more natural and less like, they're just sitting there nervously. And especially for people who are really nervous speaking in front of a camera or being recorded, their personality can completely change once the camera goes on versus how they may have been in a pre-interview.
That's true as well, yeah.
You have to try to really figure out how to get them to feel more relaxed without having them do a shot with you or something.
Yeah, but I like the way you said, be a good listener. Absolutely, right? And the weird thing is for broadcast as well, if you're a journalist who jumps in all the time and asks for clarification, a print journalist, that's okay. But on camera, I'm sure you've had to, like sometimes you're there going, you're practically miming your interactions and because you don't want to actually talk over them and stuff. And sometimes I worked with somebody who did this enough so that I noticed it was a technique. They would delay maybe a second or two before, so someone would clearly finish talking and they would keep looking just like, and then just to see if something else would come up, rather than if I was doing it and I was nervous, I would like, okay, I'll come up with the next question right away. But this person was like, just always like waiting for a little more. And sometimes the person would jump in and say a little more. And
they get nervous because there's the quiet time, and so they have to fill it. And sometimes they'll say something that they might not necessarily have said.
And
it's also important, like you said, not to step over them. Like sometimes people talk over them and they say something really great, and then if you get them to repeat it, it never sounds the same. So it's always important to kind of also have them rephrase. Well, unless it's like the person, you're handing the microphone back and forth and the interviewer's on camera, which if it's not the case, you have to make them reword the question into their answer. Otherwise, it's out of context when you edit it and you have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And Brian,
one of the things I found out after interviewing people on my show for about 8 years is it's about making people feel comfortable, giving them a sense of comfortability when they're sitting down with you, bringing them questions that aren't redundant, questions that a person might not have asked them before. Learning about the person that you're interviewing, you're talking to a little bit before you get to sit down and talk to them.
That's the preparation part, yeah.
You have to learn about them, you have to know what's going on in their world, and sometimes you have like these questions that you've already asked people. In your preparation, you should be preparing questions that are different than what you've asked people on a regular basis.
Got it.
And always just give them a space where they feel like they're at home and you're their friend.
So am I right? You wouldn't want to ask them a question that they would say, everybody always asks me that question, and I always answer this. Yeah, you want to avoid that. Yeah.
And some of these questions, you don't want to give people questions that are yes or no answers.
Right.
You know what I mean? You want to give them questions that make them want to pour out their soul, give you a more informative answer. And it's not always easy to get this stuff out of them because sometimes people are if they don't feel they're important or they don't feel they're like some big person who needs to be interviewed, they might be nervous too. And as an interviewer, sometimes you go in and you're nervous. Who am I interviewing? What am I doing? You know what I mean? And it's just always a challenge to be better than your last interview, better than your last. Go back and listen to your interview. Study it. Study your writing.
Good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
I always would listen to my interviews, my shows, like 3 days in a row after to make sure what I was doing and tell my co-host, hey, listen to this.
Did I miss an opportunity there? Okay, so I hear you. There's lots of good that you're saying there. It's in the context of deep dive interviews where you're after somebody's, their soul, as you say. And like we said in the start is, be aware of what you need from people. What you needed from people is like a unique portrait of, what they are. Sometimes what you need is like the statement of somebody about something that their company's doing. It'd be kind of completely different. So it doesn't fit for everything, but it makes a hell of a lot of sense about a profile where you have a longer form. Like I guess you were a radio show you were doing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So those are good tips. Yeah. Kyle.
Something you kind of said earlier is the idea of maybe not being super married to your own ideas going in. Because you want to try and make them comfortable, but you should at the same time be willing to go in and yourself get a little uncomfortable if need be. So like, you might be interviewing someone, for instance, that isn't going to have the same thought processes, the same ideas about how this all works, whatever your topic may be. So going in and being open to something that might be completely opposite of what you think, you still need to be able to keep that calm and allow that thought process to work around in there so that you can continue fluid conversation with someone who isn't going to see things eye to eye with you.
Got you. That makes a lot of sense. Again, in a context of like a deep dive extended interview or something where you have a chance to really think through. But just very often we have much less time than that. But yeah, makes sense. Part of good listening is listening to what they say and just not just checking off a list of questions. Okay, I asked you this one and I got this. It's like actually interacting and following their thought process. Yeah, cool. Shannon?
Usually if I'm interviewing someone who's not typically interviewed, like not a PR person, just a normal person involved with something, I ask them if they've ever been interviewed before, and if they say no, I go, awesome, it's gonna be so awkward, you're gonna love it. Because once you let them know, like, yeah, it is really awkward at first to sit and have a really deep conversation with someone you just met, they're a little more relaxed. And
Interesting.
they're less like, oh, I messed up. They're like, yeah, that was awkward.
So you're setting them at their at ease as well.
But don't do it with like PR people because they're never
They've heard it a million times. They don't seem like real people. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. There's not much in this textbook about different tools, but it's a well, the thing when I was reading this chapter that I thought was interesting is the idea that you could with a little extra effort get a good quality audio take, so you could actually use sound bites from audio tape, even if you're going out to interview somebody on a story that's destined for the web. That you could. iPhone takes excellent quality video now. There's a lot of professional journalists who are in multimedia who will shoot something on an iPhone. If you have a better camera, don't use your iPhone. But if you're there, just basically to do something for web-based, you could also record and shoot video that might actually be usable, and it might give you some other options as you're publishing this stuff. So use it. Think about that. All right. Make sure they know that they're going to be recorded, and if they're uncomfortable being recorded, let them know that it's for their sake, so that you can be accurate in telling people what it is that they were saying. So let them know that I record stuff so that it's I can go back and be sure that I'm giving the point of view that you gave to me, and that will usually help get them to say yes. JP, yeah?
Before you even go to your interview, when you email them, requesting an interview, could you let them know that you would like to record it and ask them?
I think it's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think most people would say it's okay, especially if you let them know, again, this is not for broadcast. I want a record for, for my script that I'm writing. Jenny?
Does the broadcasting department have little camcorders or whatnot?
No, this all the resources are allocated to individual classes. This class has no resources. But a phone, smartphone, or any kind of phone, even if it's not connected, we'll
Oh, I know.
record something.
You
It
can
only
get
has
really
so much
inexpensive
storage.
lavaliers for your phone too. A lavalier mic, like
$40.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you can just plug right into your phone and use the recorder in your phone. And they're not like the best, super great sound, but they're going to be a lot better than the built-in mic in your phone. So it'll be much better quality audio for you that you can listen. And
I was
write.
also thinking about video, but then with my dated phone, I only have so much space. So.
Yeah, but even with that, the audio is important because you want to hear the answers clearly. And if you were going to put it on the radio, it would just be better to, even if you were shooting the video, to have a better mic available. Yeah, so if you don't want to go out and buy like a digital recorder or something, or if you're shooting video, that would be my recommendation.
I always keep this with me. They got Rode mics for like $100, 50
Whoa.
bucks.
Those are
They
great.
got good ones for 50, 60 bucks. They're not as good as this one. This one was like 150, but I just always keep my mic and my GoPro with me just in case I have somebody to talk to or I see something that I want to.
Just don't get mugged.
Thanks.
They don't want to try to
It's an
mug me.
epidemic right now.
With the mic.
Right now, the crews are getting robbed left and right.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Unless they
even
have
being
a gun.
facetious. I'm saying don't get mugged.
Yeah. No, even 20 years ago, we had a cage in the back of our truck that was always locked, like inside the locked truck. But we'd still get stuff ripped off. Yeah. So continuing on with this idea of a multimedia approach, which I think is good because I think, even in the way we're doing this course, we're trying to write, a TV package, but then we're going to convert it for something on the web. So it's interesting to think about like what parts of your interview are going to work best as, you're just confirming facts that, complex facts, numbers, precise information. You've already felt when you did your readers and your raps that, print is better for conveying that type of precision. Whereas broadcasting seems to work better for conveying, a sense of how things are and also, more emotional and behavioral information on the people that you're covering rather than the precise facts that they're going to give you. So that could also kind of lead you, like sometimes I'll use closed-ended questions to get to that. I'll confirm facts and locations and stuff pretty early on, and then try to, as we get more comfortable, it's like, oh, that was easy. All he did was ask me, this or that, and that's pretty clear. And then maybe later on, try to delve more into the feeling or the experience of what it is that you're trying to talk about, because those are, more subjective, and people are generally more forthcoming once they're a little bit warmed up. And at that point, you want those open-ended questions to start, just open up and hear what they have to say. Shannon?
You said my favorite word, which is feeling. As soon as someone in an interview initiates a feeling or says feeling or like has a feeling and you can grasp onto it, you can drag that out and be like, tell me more about how that feels. Or like, why do you feel that way? And they're more open-ended, but once someone's like vulnerable with you, you can really get a lot of stuff out of them.
Interesting. Have you used that in your print stories as well? Yeah? Okay.
Like the profile about the soccer player.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we talked for like 2 hours. By the end of it, we were BFFs.
Oh, that was a great piece, too. Yeah. That was interesting. Okay. I thought you print people were, sort of...
I went into print knowing I was going into broadcasting.
Okay. Okay. So you're... Because it's the biggest cliche in broadcasting as well. It's like, how do you feel? Another... This time is something that I felt almost embarrassed to be present. But we had a kind of a replacement journalist over the summer, and oh gosh, a Lebanese diplomat was visiting Montreal, and this guy did his research, which is great. But he found out that this guy, the guest's brother, had been killed in Beirut, like because there were like intense factional warfare going on all the time. So this guy was in town for like some kind of Francophone summit, but first question the guy asked was like, how did you feel when you found out your brother had been killed? And it was just like, that was it. It was like just nothing. It's like, I'm not here to answer that type of question. what's your next question? And then the guy asked the next question. It was just like, gone, finished. You know, it was embarrassing, like, because, you know, it was just like reaching out for, oh, it's just, I don't think you ever could ask that guy that question anyway, no matter how long you spent with him. But it's such a cliche, like, you know, anyway. Yeah, no hands up? All right, awesome. Let's move. Closed-ended and open-ended questions. So this is what Brian was just talking about. He was saying how important it is to use open-ended questions to, you know, especially when you're doing a deep dive interview, to give people the opportunity to really, you know, expand upon their ideas and their feelings and stuff. But that doesn't mean, first of all, the closed-ended questions have their purpose. You know, if there's specific information that you simply need to confirm, you know, it would be a waste of time to try to get that through open-ended questions. You might as well, you know, just nail that down. And this often comes out of prior research. It's like, you know, I was reading in the newspaper the other day, you said X, Y, and Z, and I just want to confirm with you that's it, and or whatever. You know, these things are open-ended, yes or no. How old are you? You know, how many hundreds of people were in attendance or whatever, right? Then the open-ended, and this is where typically I think your more interesting sound bites will come from. And so here you're looking for more impressionistic stuff. You're looking to allow someone the chance to talk. The difficulty is sometimes you'll get like just too much, or just like a free associated stream, and that can be tough to edit into a tighter piece. It can be great if you're doing a half-hour radio or something and you have that chance to let it run. But right, so the open-ended is good for the deeper issue, and I believe, what the heck, huh? We have a video on this. Let's see what they can tell us in video.
Good day, I'm Tracy McCormick, and this is the McCormick Media Minute. Ascertaining information from a prospect or customer should and can happen continuously throughout the sales process. Even when you receive some resistance or objections from your prospect, you can still use questioning tactics to give you even more information to help you get to what the real issue is. To do this best, you'll need to understand the art of asking open-ended questions. Yes or no questions get you an answer that's just that, yes or no. And some examples of open-ended questions to get your prospect really talking are ones like, why do you say that? Why do you feel that way? What would need to exist in order to? Or, I'm curious about how that came to be. Or tell me more about that. If you could have anything you wanted to have happen, what would that be? Using these types of questions will give your listener an open playing field for discussing their feelings and opinions. And then hearing those feelings and opinions, if handled right, may just give you something to really sell them. McCormick Media Services thanks you, and we hope you've enjoyed our minute.
All right.
That was such a good minute.
Well sold, well sold.
So precise.
Yeah, it's actually 107. It's still a minute. That was the media. I guess she doesn't count. No, she doesn't count the introduction into the media minute. So that's cool.
Round down.
All right, but she gave us some examples of open-ended questions.
It was really good too, because she didn't sound, I mean, she was quickly paced, but not out of breath. She was. I'm an audio person. I edit audio for a living. I really would have cleaned up the. They did not go over that. They did audio pass.
Well, she was conservatively deaf.
But she did have a lot of good stuff to say in a short period of
And I
time.
wasn't like stressed out by the pace.
Yeah, the breathing really always gets.
Fast. Have you guys heard on NPR the 60-second philosopher? They're hysterical. I don't know. It's just this guy who talks so fast about philosophy. It's funny. All right, the questions. So you're supposed to write about 10 questions for your thing. Could be more if you want. You should come up with 4 or 5 primary questions that will serve as the skeletal structure of your interviews. So get a sense of what you want to come out of it. A profile is often kind of in biographical order. If you choose a different route, like I did with my philosopher, try to think through what is a potential organization for the information you're going to get out. Kind of like prior to actually having to put the piece together, it's like, okay, what's the story I'm going to tell here, and make sure that you're asking questions that will get the information that you think you need. So that's 4 or 5 questions that will be your skeletal structure. It's sort of like knowing in advance what you need to know so you can ask the right questions, making sure then that you don't have to go back or call them again for clarification or something. Try when you write your questions, and this is tough. This is something that I often, have paused over. It's like if you're writing questions, are they clear and easy to understand? Do you have one thing you want to know in each question and not 5? Because the first thing I start doing is loading in several things into one question or something, and then it just becomes unanswerable. So read your questions over and think, okay, am I just asking for one thing? And am I being clear about what I want? Using the words that will connect the person that I'm interviewing. So that's important. Again, I often, when writing, I use vocabulary that is a little obscure sometimes. Got to go back. In the flow of your interview, try to kind of warm them up a little bit. Don't put your most challenging question first. Get some simple things up if you can. I wouldn't advocate making a joke, but if things are tense early on, as part of your good listening, if you can, and empathy, if you can, connect in that way a little bit in the beginning to encourage people. So that means that some of the trickier things that may be harder for them to explain or may make them less comfortable, you could save them for later. If it was a particularly emotional experience, maybe those questions that are likely to be more emotional could come later. We did a whole series about people who were suffering with AIDS, and before there was a cure or a way of coping with it, and it was so hard, like 12 days in a row, and we were joking by the end of it, just as a way of keeping ourselves, kind of stable or something. We'd say, we're going to walk, they'll open the door, we'll put the camera down, and they'll start crying. It was just like, because it would so often just lead to, people confronted with, impending death and stuff. So it was tough, but, so I think the thing to do is to pace it so it has a flow when you get to the heavier stuff later. Right. So these 2 slides, pretty much the same thing. It's important not to talk all the time in an interview. Give people a chance to elaborate. The key is to maintain eye contact with the source. So again, I've just seen so often people nodding, just trying not to make any sound that will cover over, but otherwise just... In fact, we call reaction shots nodders. You're listening, just... Okay, cool. We can continue. There's not too much more about this. But Jenny, I know you won't be able to be with us next class. Would you like to share your story ideas with us? Or
I don't mind. I don't want to crap on people's time.
We only have a few minutes, but I think we still have 2-3 minutes. Is that enough?
Yeah? Sure, gladly. For my profile idea, I jumped straight for trying to get an interview with Stanley Roberts of Cron 4.
Yes!
Wow.
Because I love his segments and he always cracks me up, but also he touches on a lot of sensitive and crucial topics, including littering, dumping, pedestrian safety, even the most recent one adopted by the San Mateo, I think supervisor or something, about bringing the law from Hawaii of the pedestrian walking cell phone. If you do that, then you're going to be ticketed much like a distracted driver would be on their phone. And then the off one that was inspirational for my reader and rat, or rather reader, I went ahead and contacted at least 2 of the 3 humanitarian organizations that were featured and recognized in the article, so ARF and East Bay SPCA, and I've already established contact with all 3 of them, and I already showed them my suggested idea that I submitted, and I also asked for feedback to give me any additional information I should put in there, and I talked to all 3 of them by now already.
Terrific, terrific. So
They're
you've
anticipating me to contact them again.
got you. So that's such a big hurdle to get over already, is to make contact and have the door open. So, and those sound like great topics. And I love the way that you were able to, draw on other media to find out, okay, who do I contact? You did your research, you find out who are the contact points at these institutions. You want to talk to people, and go ahead and get in touch. That's fantastic, Jenny. Any ideas, or given that some of what Jenny's talking about already?
I love the Stanley Roberts idea, because I'm obsessed with him.
When he responded back to me again, because it took me at least 3 different times to reach out to him, letting him know that, this is how the pace of it is going to go. This is a part of a longer, larger assignment. Please anticipate to expect this. It's not just going to be a one-time, hi, I'm at your door, come and talk to me. Okay, bada bing, bada boom, we're done. So I made sure I let all of them know that ahead of time. And then when he responded again this morning, I practically jumped out of my freaking seat.
I can't wait to read your interview.
Seriously, Stanley's best.
Well, you may have trouble choosing between one or the other, but as
that
you
was the
could.
other thing that was in my mind. I'm sorry, cute little animals. I love you.
Well, you can do.
Whatever is going to be the best
Stanley
portfolio
Roberts.
piece for you.
Yeah,
Stanley.
that's a good recommendation.
That's how I would choose.
And
You're trying to build on a career.
you can always switch midstream as well. But that's a good point. The portfolio piece. Our professional development guy Aria was talking about how important that is. It's true. Yeah. Good points. Okay, well, next class we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the 2-story ideas, and hopefully people will be able to give each other contacts and encouragement and good critique. So I'm looking forward to that.